Today, folks, I want to talk about copper. I think it's one of the most underappreciated, propelling to all-time high commodities that is going to be powering the electrified future, currently trading around $5 per pound. I've recently seen some articles out of Fortune saying that the hopes of a 10-year EV transition are an irrational pipe dream because we just don't have enough battery materials, and opening up a single copper mine can take 23 years, though I don't think that's going to be the case moving forward because of the ramifications that copper currently has on society. I think governments are waking up to the reality of commodities and are trying to fast track some of the operations, but most people are unaware that a typical EV requires over 132 pounds of copper as opposed to just 52 pounds for an average gas vehicle. And forget all the old copper infrastructure in society that needs to be upgraded. Look at the renewable resources like wind and solar also requiring huge amounts of copper. So now we know there's value here. I want to talk about stocks that actually have some real opportunity, and Oroco Resources really sticks out. This is a company that has a fascinating history. I want to kind of break down trading on the TSX-V under OCO and on the OTC markets under ORRCF. And recently the company has been getting a little bit of rallying. I mean, year to date, the stock's up about 32%. But let's break this down. If you're on a path to financial independence, if you damn well one day want to retire early, consider subscribing, joining me on that journey now. Oroco Resources is a sponsor of this channel. All the disclaimers are in the description below, but I promise you this is one of the most intriguing companies that I've been working with recently that is definitely worth paying attention to. And we got to roll back a little bit because they have access to over 5 billion pounds of copper. I want to say that again, over 5+ billion pounds of copper that they gained access to basically through a lawsuit over land. That once they won that lawsuit, they gained huge ownership over this property in Mexico that actually drove up the value of the stock by 1,400% before getting way too ahead of itself and now consolidating to a place where I personally think that it has actually been oversold. And basically the project we're talking about is Santo Tomas, and the company holds about an 85.5% interest in the central concessions that comprise about 1,173 hectares, the core concessions of the Santo Tomas project located in northwestern Mexico. Now, the company also holds an 80% interest in an additional 7,861 hectares of mineral concessions surrounding the adjacent to the core concession. And from my understanding, they're going to be taking this project to a level where it can be acquired and moved into operation, because we're talking about tens of billions of copper value here. And the Mexican government is actually getting on board with this because they recently announced basically Plan Mexico, where they're striving with a 2030 goal to make 50% of national supply and consumption will be made in Mexico's strategic sectors and be in the top 10 economies. And they're looking at their commodities. And from my understanding, basically the board of directors from Oroco Resources is meeting with some government officials in Mexico to help continue to build this resource out, get employment. Again, this is not a small project. In fact, I had the privilege of sitting down with Ian Graham from the board of Oroco, and he actually talked about the value of this project and the milestones they're looking to hit. So I would just take a quick listen. It's fascinating. Yeah, and just kind of speaking of the ones and zeros here, do you want to talk about the actual value? I know it's changing every day with the copper prices, but give some people a little bit of taste of what the interest is here.
Certainly. We're at 5.5 billion pounds of copper equivalent, and the mine plan that we have put together, we're looking at $1 billion a year cash flowing business at $4 copper. So clearly substantially more as the copper price rises. And, NPV of the project at $4 copper was 1.5 billion US dollars. And capex to build a little over 1 billion US dollars. So that's a very good capex to NPV ratio when compared with other copper projects globally. And so we think as a company holding just that singular asset, we're clearly directly geared, in our view, to that asset and its value.
And I wouldn't mind talking about unlocking that potential value between Plan Mexico, an administration that's getting really on board with waking up to local mining, building out that infrastructure as well. Do you want to talk about what takes you? And again, I think the street's finally waking up to the value of what you guys have, starting to get some higher volume bumps here. But maybe explain, like, how do we unlock that value of Oroco here? Does it have to do with partnering and getting the government on board? Does it have to do with the finishing up some of the whatever you guys have to do for the PEAs and stuff? Maybe just tell us exactly what you think is going to be going on here.
Clearly, partnering with the federal government here in Mexico is critical, and we have put our shoulders to the wheel on that over the last several months, and that has begun to bear fruit just recently. And so we have a former senator for the state of Sinaloa now effectively a congressman currently sitting, has joined with us to champion the project, move it forward, and help stabilize the region that the project is in. And so with that occurring and a general pivot at the highest levels in Mexico to re-embrace mining, which is a process we see as continuing right at the moment, we think that our project will again become extremely attractive for a developer to acquire. We do have a little work yet to do. We have the so-called South Zone, which requires some drilling. It's a modest amount of drilling to lift the resource into the indicated category. We have a clear path for doing that. We need to raise a little money and get that done, but we're inviting the investing public and also institutions to come along with us on that next step of in the project development and help us get teed up for a fundamental transaction that would liberate great value in our estimation for holders of the company.
And the great thing about companies like this is that they don't have a lot of debt, right? Like Oroco isn't sitting on hardly any debt. They just have the value of this asset that they want to bring to a place to acquisition to unlock like substantial value for shareholders. And they recently raised about $2.3 million. They're putting themselves in a great financing place, even though the stock is still able to rally on the back of some of that financing. This isn't a company that is looking to pump and dump the project. They legitimately want to take this into $1 billion+ value. And I'm really fascinated to see how this story unfolds, to see what the Mexican officials actually give some updates on around this project. But I'm going to be breaking this down farther in the future, so if it's a company you appreciate, again, let me know what you think in that comment section below and consider subscribing for future updates.